The air on Xylos tasted of ozone and damp soil, a permanent metallic tang that clung to the back of the throat. It was the scent of the planet's blood, the crystalline rock that jutted from the earth like broken bones, perpetually weeping mineral-rich water. Kalen drew it in, a familiar perfume. He lay flat on a bed of phosphorescent moss, the slick, cool texture a comfort against his cheek. Beside him, Lena shifted, her movement a whisper of leather on stone. They were both encased in the planet's deadliest secret, the cured, chitinous hide of a glimmerwing stalker. Under the dim glow of Xylos's twin moons, the hides performed their magic. The overlapping plates, iridescent and black, didn't just mimic the color of the twilight landscape. They actively bent light around them, creating a shimmer, a heat-haze distortion that broke up their human silhouettes. To the multifaceted eyes of their prey, they were little more than a trick of the light, a patch of glinting stone. Kalen raised a gloved hand, 2 fingers extended. A signal. Lena responded with a single, soft click of her tongue against her teeth. Understood. The target was close. He could feel it not through sight or sound, but through the faint, rhythmic vibrations in the rock beneath him. The glimmerwing stalkers were heavy creatures, 6-legged predators that moved with an unnerving, silent grace until they were within striking distance. Their quarry was a bull, separated from its pack. Kalen had been tracking it for 3 days, learning its patterns, its preferred hunting grounds, the telltale scrape of its talons on the obsidian flats. The beast was a masterpiece of evolution. Its armored carapace could deflect small arms' fire, a fact the newcomers, the skyfolk, had learned the hard way. Its primary weapons were 2 scythe-like forelimbs that could shear through a man's torso, and a sonic pulse it could emit from a resonating chamber in its chest, capable of disorienting any creature with inner-ear bones. Humans, thankfully, were less susceptible than Xylos's native fauna, but a close-range blast could still induce crippling vertigo. The vibrations grew stronger. Kalen pressed his ear to the ground, closing his eyes. He pictured the creature's path, a mental map drawn from years of experience. It was circling the clearing below, testing the air with the feathery antennae that fringed its massive, eyeless head. It hunted by sound, vibration, and the faint bioelectric fields of its prey. The hides they wore did more than just provide visual camouflage. The inner layers of sinew and membrane were woven with fine, metallic filaments harvested from a specific type of cave fungus, which dampened their own biosignatures to almost nothing. Lena readied her spear. Its tip was a sharpened shard of the same crystal that formed the planet's skeleton, honed to a monomolecular edge. The shaft was wrapped in cured stalker tendon, providing a sure grip. It was a primitive weapon by any other standard, but on Xylos it was perfect. It made no sound, had no energy signature, and delivered a potent neurotoxin derived from the glands of a lesser predator. A shadow fell over the clearing. The glimmerwing bull emerged from a copse of pulsating fungi, its form a nightmare of chitin and muscle. It stood over 3 meters at the shoulder, its head sweeping from side to side. It was magnificent, terrifying. Kalen felt the familiar thrill, the cold fire of the hunt that separated his people from the skyfolk cowering in their fortified cities. The humans of Haven did not fear the night. They had become a part of it. The bull lowered its head, sniffing at a burrow. This was the moment. Kalen gave the signal, a low hum that mimicked the sound of a burrow crawler, a stalker delicacy. The bull's head snapped up, its antennae twitching, homing in on the source. It took a step, then another, its massive legs sinking slightly into the soft moss. Kalen and Lena rose as one, 2 fluid shadows detaching from the landscape. They didn't run. They flowed, their steps synchronized, silent. The bull sensed the movement, a flicker of something wrong in its perception of the world. It began to turn, its resonating chamber glowing with a faint blue light as it prepared a sonic blast. It was too late. Kalen was on its left flank, Lena on its right. He drove his spear into the soft tissue just behind its foremost leg, a spot where the armored plates overlapped but didn't quite meet. He felt the jarring impact as the crystal tip punched through thick hide and muscle, then the sickening give as it sank deep into the creature's torso. Simultaneously, Lena's spear found its mark on the opposite side. The bull shrieked, a sound that was half grinding metal, half tearing flesh. It was a sound that could freeze a man's blood, but to Kalen, it was the sound of success. The neurotoxin was fast-acting. The great beast staggered, its scythe-like claws flailing wildly. It tried to bring its head around, but its legs were already buckling. The blue glow in its chest faded. It crashed to the ground with a shudder that shook the very rock beneath their feet. Kalen and Lena stood over their kill, their breath misting in the cool night air. The hunt was over. Survival for another cycle was assured. The hide from this bull would protect 2 more hunters. Its meat would feed a dozen families. Its sinews would be used for cordage, its bones for tools. Nothing was wasted. This was the way of Haven. This was how they had thrived for 5 generations on a world that was supposed to be a death sentence. As they began the long, arduous process of field dressing the kill, Kalen glanced toward the horizon. A steady, white light pierced the perpetual twilight. The Skyfolk's main settlement, a place they called Citadel, a sterile dome of light and steel, an affront to the planet's raw beauty. He felt a familiar pang of contempt. They had arrived 2 years ago in their silver ships, soldiers of some vast, interstellar empire they called the Compact. They came with plasma rifles, energy shields, and hovering vehicles. They had declared Xylos ripe for colonization. Then the suns had set. The first night, the Compact had lost an entire patrol to a pack of glimmerwings. Their advanced sensors couldn't properly track the creatures. Their weapons were ineffective against the carapace unless they scored a lucky shot, and their soldiers' panicked heartbeats were like ringing dinner bells in the dark. After a month of brutal losses, they had adopted a new strategy. They hid. When the twin moons rose, the Compact sealed themselves inside their fortresses, surrounded by crackling energy fences and automated turrets. They ceded the night to the stalkers. Humans whose ancestors had crash-landed on Xylos over a century ago with nothing but the clothes on their backs had learned a different lesson. You couldn't defeat the night. You had to join it. "Look," Lena whispered, her voice tight. Kalen followed her gaze. High above, a small, dark shape was moving against the cloud-streaked sky. It was silent, too slow for a meteor, too deliberate for any native flyer. A compact drone. It was watching them. They were common enough near Citadel, but rare this far out in the wilds. "Let them watch," Kalen grunted, turning back to his work. "Let them see how it's done." He plunged his knife into the beast's thick hide, a sense of pride and superiority warming him. They were survivors, warriors. The Skyfolk were just tenants waiting for their lease to expire. He had no idea how wrong he was. The drone wasn't just watching, it was learning. The settlement of Haven was built into the hollowed-out skeleton of a colossal, long-dead creature that dwarfed even the largest glimmerwing bull. Its fossilized ribs, each as thick as an ancient tree, formed the arches of their great hall. Homes were carved into the surrounding cliffs, connected by rope bridges and winding stone staircases. It was a place of bone and stone, leather and firelight, a testament to human ingenuity. The return of a successful hunting party was always a cause for celebration. As Kalen and Lena guided the pack beasts laden with meat and the carefully harvested hide through the main gate, a cheer went up. Children ran alongside them, their faces alight with awe. Elders nodded in approval. The weight of their success settled on Kalen's shoulders, a familiar and welcome burden. He was a provider, a protector. Ilara, the eldest of their council, met him by the central fire pit. Her face was a road map of wrinkles, her eyes the color of the evening sky, holding a wisdom that came from a lifetime of survival on Xylos. "A fine kill, Kalen," she said, her voice raspy but strong. She placed a hand on the massive, iridescent hide. "This one was old, strong. Its spirit will watch over our new hunters." "It fought well," Kalen replied, showing the proper respect. Lena was swift, her first bull. Ilara smiled at the young woman, who flushed with pride. "You learn from the best. Soon you will lead your own hunts." Later, as the community shared the fresh meat, the talk inevitably turned to the Skyfolk. "Another drone today," Kalen mentioned to a group of hunters gathered around the fire. "Farther out than usual, watched us dress the kill." A burly hunter named Jorik scoffed. "Probably trying to figure out how we do it without their fancy plasma guns. Cowards, they sit in their metal box and watch the world through glass eyes." "They are not cowards, Jorik," Ilara's voice cut through the bravado. She had a way of speaking that commanded attention without raising her volume. "They are cautious, and they are patient. Do not mistake their methods for weakness." "What methods?" Jorik gestured dismissively. "Hiding, that's all they do. By day they strip the land with their machines. By night they lock their doors and pray the monsters don't find a way in. We live with the monsters. We are the greater monsters." A murmur of agreement went through the group. It was a common sentiment. The people of Haven saw the compact as technologically superior but spiritually and fundamentally weak. They didn't understand the planet, the rhythm of its life and death. They sought to dominate it, to pave it over. Haven sought to become part of it. "Their patience is what worries me," Alara continued, her gaze fixed on the distant glow of Citadel. "They have been here for 2 years, they have watched us, they have studied the stalkers. They are soldiers, and soldiers do not accept a stalemate. They are looking for an advantage." Kalen felt a prickle of unease, but he pushed it aside. What advantage could they possibly gain? They couldn't move at night. Their technology was a liability in the dense, spore-choked forests where sensors failed and energy signatures were a beacon for predators. Let them look. They'll find nothing but their own fear out there in the dark. Inside the sterile, white-lit confines of Citadel, Xyler analyzed the data feed from the drone. He was a xenobiologist by training, conscripted into the Compact's expansionary force. His official title was Pacification Analyst, a sanitized term for someone who studied native life forms to determine the most efficient way to eradicate them. On the main holoscreen, the recording of the 2 humans played out in stark, thermal detail. He watched them move, their grace, their silence. He watched them take down a creature that had previously been classified as a Tier 1 threat, a creature that had wiped out 3 squads of his own people. They did it with sharpened sticks. "Incredible," he murmured to himself. The door to the lab slid open and Commander Vorlag entered. Vorlag was a career military officer, a being carved from pragmatism and impatience. His carapace, the natural armor of his species, was a dull, militaristic gray, scarred from a dozen campaigns on a dozen different worlds. "Report, Analyst," Vorlag said, his voice a low growl. His species did not have vocal cords in the human sense. They spoke through a series of complex vibrations from their chest cavity. The universal translator worn by all Compact personnel converted it into sterile, robotic speech. "The feral humans, Commander. They have done it again," Xyler replied, gesturing to the screen. "They took down a mature glimmerwing bull. The efficiency is remarkable. Their camouflage, derived from the creature's own hide, appears to fool the glimmerwing's sensory organs completely. It's not just visual, I believe it masks their biosignature." Vorlag watched the final moments of the hunt, the 2 humans striking with brutal precision. He wasn't impressed. He was annoyed. "They are an infestation," Vorlag rumbled. "They move through the primary threat environment with impunity. They are the apex predator on this planet. Our colonization schedule is already 94 cycles behind. The High Command is growing displeased." "Their hunting techniques are a paradigm of ecological integration," Xyler countered, unable to hide his scientific fascination. "They don't fight the ecosystem. They've become the keystone species within it. If we could understand their methods—" "We do not need to understand them," Vorlag interrupted, his massive form stepping closer to the screen. He pointed a 4-digited hand at the cloaked figures. "We need to replicate their advantage. The problem has never been the planet's fauna. The problem is that we cannot operate effectively during the nocturnal cycle. These primitives can. That is the tactical imbalance we must correct." A cold knot formed in Xyler's gut. He knew where this was going. "Commander, you are not suggesting—" "The hides," Vorlag stated, his voice flat with finality. "They are the key. If their camouflage is that effective, our soldiers could use it to move undetected at night. We could establish forward outposts, eradicate the stalker nests, and secure the continent within a dozen cycles." "But the humans will not simply give them to us," Xyler said, horrified. "To them it is more than just armor. It appears to have cultural, perhaps even spiritual significance. Taking it would be—" "Necessary," Vorlag finished. "They are an unlisted, non-sapient species, a remnant of a lost colony ship, reverted to tribalism. They have no rights under Compact law. They are simply another variable in the pacification equation." He turned to face Xyler, his dark eyes unblinking. "You have analyzed their tactics. Now devise a counter-tactic. I want a plan to acquire the camouflage technology by any means necessary, and I want a viable sample. Soon. The order was clear. The compact was not just going to watch anymore. They were going to hunt. But their prey wasn't the glimmerwing stalkers. A week later, Kalen and Lena were tracking a smaller pack near the jagged crystalline spires known as the teeth. The air was unusually still, the normal chorus of nocturnal insects strangely silent. A sense of wrongness hung in the air, a discordant note in the planet's symphony. "Something's off," Lena whispered, her hand resting on the hilt of her knife. "It's too quiet." "The pack is near," Kalen said, his senses on high alert. "They've spooked the lesser creatures." They crested a ridge and looked down into a narrow canyon. What they saw made Kalen's blood run cold. 3 glimmerwing stalkers lay dead on the canyon floor. It wasn't the fact of their death that was shocking, it was the manner of it. There were no spear wounds, no signs of a struggle with a rival predator. Instead, their carapaces were punctured with small, precise holes, the edges blackened and cauterized. Plasma burns. "Sky folk," Lena breathed, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. "They came out at night." Kalen moved cautiously down the slope, his spear held ready. This changed everything. The compact had never ventured out of their walls after moonrise. For them to kill 3 stalkers so cleanly meant they had found a new weapon, a new strategy. He knelt beside the largest of the dead creatures. The kill shot was perfect, a blast through the thinner plates of the skull. Expertly done. But there was something else wrong. He ran a hand over the stalker's hide. Large sections of the most iridescent, light-bending plates had been cut away, removed with a surgical precision that spoke of advanced cutting tools. "They didn't just kill it," Kalen murmured, his mind racing. "They harvested it." "Why?" Lena pointed toward the far end of the canyon. "Tracks." The tracks were not from stalkers. They were boot prints, the distinctive geometric tread of compact military hardware. Kalen and Lena followed them, their own cloaked forms melting into the shadows. The trail led them out of the canyon and into a dense thicket of spore-releasing ferns. And then they found him. It was Marcus, one of Haven's most experienced lone hunters. He was slumped against the base of a crystal formation, his eyes wide with a final, uncomprehending terror. A single, cauterized hole was burned through the center of his chest. His spear lay broken beside him. But the ultimate violation, the act that screamed of a fundamental shift in the world, was that his glimmerwing hide, the cloak he had worn for 10 years, the symbol of his status and skill, was gone. Lena let out a small, choked gasp. Kalen felt a cold, hard rage crystallize in his chest. The silence in the air suddenly made sense. It wasn't the silence of predators on the prowl. It was the silence of a world holding its breath. The rules of the hunt had been broken. The Skyfolk hadn't just learned how to kill the monsters in the dark. They had learned how to become them. And in this new, terrifying wilderness, humans were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. The journey back to Haven was a blur of grim determination. Kalen carried Marcus's body draped over his shoulders, the dead weight a constant, horrific reminder of their discovery. The grief was a sharp stone in his gut, but it was overshadowed by a chilling, razor-edged clarity. The game had changed. The compact wasn't just a nuisance or a curiosity anymore. They were a threat unlike any they had ever faced. When he walked through the gates of Haven, silence fell over the bustling community. The sight of a fallen hunter, stripped of his hide, was a desecration. It was an act of profound disrespect, not just to the man, but to the very spirit of their way of life. Alara met him, her face a mask of sorrow. She placed a hand on Marcus's cold cheek and closed his staring eyes. "The Skyfolk," Kalen said, his voice raw. He needed to say no more. That night the great hall of Haven was not filled with the sounds of celebration, but with the low murmur of fear and anger. The council of elders sat before the central fire, its flames casting long, dancing shadows on the fossilized ribs above. Kalen stood before them, recounting every detail: the dead stalkers, the plasma burns, the missing hides, the boot prints, and finally Marcus. "They are using our methods against us," he concluded, his fists clenched. "They took his hide. They mean to walk the night as we do." Jorik, his earlier bravado replaced by a furious scowl, slammed his fist against a stone table. "This is an act of war. They hunt one of ours. We will hunt 10 of theirs. We will show them what real predators are." A chorus of angry shouts echoed his sentiment. The call for immediate, bloody revenge was a wildfire sweeping through the hall, but Alara raised a hand, and the flames of their rage subsided to a smolder. "And what then, Jorik?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "You lead a party to their fortress. You might kill a few of their guards at the gate, and in return they will unleash weapons from the sky that can turn this entire mountain to glass. Vengeance is a fire that warms you for a moment but ultimately consumes you. We cannot fight them with rage." "Then we fight them with fear," another hunter shouted. "We know the wilds. We can bleed them one by one until they run back to their ships." "They will not run," Kalen said, his voice cutting through the noise. The rage was still there, but it was now a cold, focused thing. "They want this world. They see us as an obstacle, an animal in their path to be removed. They think we are primitives. They underestimate us. That is our only advantage." "What do you propose, Kalen?" Alara asked, her ancient eyes fixed on him. "We turn the hunt back on them," he said. "They are using our camouflage, but they do not understand it. They do not know the subtleties, the way the light catches it, the sounds it makes against different surfaces. They do not know the stalker's mind. They are wearing the skin of the beast, but they do not have its soul. We will use their arrogance against them. We will not attack their fortress. We will stalk their patrols. We will learn their tactics, their numbers, their intent. We will observe the observers." His plan was met with a hesitant silence. It was not the glorious, vengeful charge many desired, but it was smart. It was the way of the hunter, not the brawler. Alara nodded slowly. "Patience, observation, precision, this is our way. Kalen will lead, choose your team, find out what they are doing. Show them that this land has teeth they cannot see." In a darkened lab within Citadel, Xyler worked feverishly. The captured human hide and the harvested glimmerwing plates were spread across an analysis table. His instruments hummed, projecting holographic displays of molecular structures and energy-dampening fields. What he was discovering was astounding. The humans hadn't just cured the hides. They had integrated the biofilamented fungus into the membrane, creating a complex biological weave. It was a form of composite armor and stealth technology that was organic, self-repairing, and more effective than any personal cloaking device the Compact had ever engineered. It wasn't primitive, it was post-biological. Commander Vorlag entered, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet lab. He was flanked by two elite soldiers, their gray carapaces gleaming under the sterile lights. They were already being fitted with crude approximations of the camouflage, large plates of glimmerwing chitin strapped to their combat armor. "Have you isolated the masking properties?" Vorlag rumbled. "It's more complex than that, Commander," Xyler said, trying to convey the wonder of his discovery. "This isn't just a material, it's a symbiotic system. The fungal filaments seem to react to the wearer's bioelectric field, actively shaping the stealth properties. It's alive in a way." Vorlag was uninterested in the science. "Can it be replicated?" "Not quickly, not without understanding the fungus, the curing process, Then the prototypes will have to suffice," Vorlag said, gesturing to the soldiers. The initial field test was a success. The squad eliminated 3 stalkers and acquired the target specimen with 0 casualties. "Tonight, we begin Phase 2. We will deploy 3 hunter-killer teams. Their objective is to patrol the perimeter, eliminate any stalker threats, and acquire more of the camouflage material." The euphemism hung in the air. Acquire more material. He meant hunt more humans. "Commander, this is a mistake," Xyler pleaded. "The humans are not simple animals. Their technology is biological, sophisticated. We should be attempting to communicate with them, to learn." "They are a threat to the mission," Vorlag said, his tone leaving no room for debate. "And threats are neutralized. Your analysis has provided us with the weapon we need to pacify this world. Be content with that, analyst. Your duty is done." As Vorlag and his soldiers swept out of the lab, Xyler looked at the hide on his table. It was a work of art, a piece of a culture he was now helping to destroy. He felt a profound sense of shame. He was a scientist, a seeker of knowledge, yet he was being used as a tool for extermination. He had given the butchers a sharper knife. Kalen chose his team carefully. Lena, for her speed and keen senses, an old, quiet hunter named Silas, who knew the southern territories better than anyone. and two brothers, Finn and Rorik, who were experts in traps and ambush. 5 of them, cloaked in their shimmering hides, slipped out of haven under the watchful eyes of the twin moons. They didn't seek out the compact. They sought out their hunting grounds. Kalen knew that the aliens, for all their technology, were predictable. They would establish a perimeter and sweep it methodically. He led his team to a region of dense, metallic jungle, a place where the trees had iron-laced bark that could confuse sensors. For 2 nights they saw nothing. They moved like ghosts, living off ration supplies, never sleeping all at once. On the 3rd night they found what they were looking for, a scent on the air. A faint, artificial smell, like superheated air and ionized particles. The signature of plasma weaponry. Kalen signaled for a halt. They melted into the shadows of the iron trees, becoming indistinguishable from the gnarled trunks. Minutes later, a patrol of 3 figures emerged into a clearing. They were compact soldiers, tall and imposing in their black armor. But they were crudely draped in glimmerwing plates, the iridescent chitin looking awkward and unnatural against their bulky, geometric forms. They moved slowly, cautiously, their plasma rifles held at the ready. They were trying to mimic the silence of a hunter, but their armored boots crunched on the gravel, and the hum of their armor's power systems was a low thrum in the quiet night. Amateurs, Silas breathed beside Kalen, his voice barely a whisper. The compact team stopped in the center of the clearing. One of them raised a device, a scanner of some kind, and swept it across the jungle. Kalen and his team remained perfectly still, regulating their breathing, lowering their heart rates. The scanner's beam passed over them without a flicker. The hides worked, but the aliens were not stupid. They were searching for heat signatures, movement, energy sources. They weren't looking for a patch of shimmering rock. This was their chance, not to fight but to learn. For an hour, Kalen's team shadowed the patrol, observing their movements, their communication signals, a series of clicks from their helmets, their patrol patterns. They were disciplined, professional soldiers, but they were in an environment they did not understand. They feared the shadows. Kalen's people were born of them. Then, the situation changed. A low growl echoed from the trees to the left of the compact patrol. A glimmerwing stalker, drawn by the sound of their armor. The soldiers immediately formed a defensive triangle, their rifles pointed outward. The stalker emerged, a young female, lean and hungry. It circled them, its eyeless head low, its antennae twitching. Kalen watched, his heart pounding. He could let the stalker attack them, it would be justice. But it would also alert the compact that this area was dangerous. It might even reveal his own team's position. He made a decision. He put 2 fingers to his lips and let out a high-pitched whistle, a perfect imitation of a territorial shriekbat. The sound was meaningless to the aliens, but to the stalker, it signaled a larger, more dangerous predator in the area. The stalker paused, its head tilting. It growled once more, a sound of frustration, and then melted back into the jungle. It would seek easier prey. The compact soldiers stood for a long moment, their rifles sweeping the empty trees. They had been spared, and they didn't even know why, but Kalen knew. He had saved them, not out of mercy, but out of strategy. He had asserted his dominance, his mastery of this world, in a way they couldn't possibly comprehend. He let them live so he could hunt them better. As the patrol moved on, a new, colder resolve settled over Kalen. Observing was not enough. The next time they met, he would not be a ghost. He would be a blade. He would teach the Skyfolk the first and most important rule of Xylos. Everything here is either hunter or prey, and the moment you forget which you are, you have already been caught. The time for observation was over. The lessons had been learned. Kalen led his team back to a prearranged cache, a small, hidden cave where they had stored more specialized equipment. The compact soldiers were hunting humans for their hides. It was time to set a trap for the hunters. "They move in threes," Kalen explained to his team, his voice a low whisper in the darkness of the cave. "They are reliant on their scanners, but the devices have a narrow field of view. Their armor is loud. Their camouflage is a mockery. It only works if they are standing still. They are soldiers, not stalkers. We will use that." The plan was simple and brutal. They would not engage in a direct firefight. That was suicide. They would separate their targets, disorient them, and then strike. Finn and Rorik, the trap experts, had spent the previous day weaving nets from stalker sinew, tough as steel cable and lined with sharpened bone hooks. Sealers had identified a narrow pass, a natural choke point flanked by high, sheer cliffs. They set the ambush and waited. The bait was a piece of compact technology Kalen had recovered from the site where Marcus was killed, a small, damaged power cell. He let it pulse with a faint, repeating energy signal, a distress call he hoped their scanners would pick up. It took until the deepest point of the night when the twin moons were directly overhead. A series of helmet clicks echoed down the pass. A three-person patrol, just as he'd predicted. They moved slowly, their plasma rifles sweeping the darkness. "Signal detected," came the translated robotic voice of one of the soldiers, loud in the stillness. "Matches the signature of Squad 7's lost power cell." "Proceed with caution," another voice commanded. It could be a trap. They were cautious, but not cautious enough. As the point soldier stepped over a line of carefully placed leaves, Rorik pulled a cord. A net, weighted with rocks, sprang from the ground, enveloping the soldier and hoisting him 10 feet into the air. He flailed, trapped in the sinew mesh, his plasma rifle discharging a bolt of energy that seared a black scar into the cliff face. "Contact!" the squad leader yelled. The remaining 2 soldiers fell back to back, raising their weapons. From the cliffs above, Lena and Silas opened fire. Not with guns, but with powerful crossbows. The bolts were fletched with the feathers of a nocturnal bird, making them nearly silent in flight. The tips were not designed to kill, but to deliver a payload. They shattered on impact with the soldier's armor, releasing a thick, viscous fluid, the glandular secretion of a cave-dwelling arachnid. It was not toxic, but it was incredibly sticky and, when exposed to air, hardened into an opaque, resin-like shell. The 2 soldiers were suddenly blinded, their helmet visors coated in the rapidly hardening goo. One of them began firing wildly, plasma bolts incinerating trees and rocks. The other clawed desperately at his helmet, trying to clear his vision. This was Kalen's cue. He burst from the shadows, a specter in his shimmering hide. He ignored the soldier who was firing blindly. He was a danger to himself and his comrade. Kalen's target was the leader, the one trying to clear his visor. The alien was huge, far larger than Kalen, and encased in armor. A direct confrontation was foolish. Kalen didn't attack the soldier, he attacked his weapon. He brought his spear shaft down hard on the plasma rifle, the force of the blow knocking it from the alien's grasp. It clattered to the ground. The soldier, blinded and disarmed, let out a frustrated roar and lunged in Kalen's direction. Kalen sidestepped easily, the big alien stumbling past him. As he passed, Kalen swung the butt of his spear into the back of the alien's knee joint. There was a crack of stressed metal and a pained grunt. The soldier went down on one knee. Meanwhile, the netted alien had managed to cut himself partially free and was trying to aim his sidearm. A spear, thrown with deadly accuracy by Finn from the shadows, slammed into his weapon hand. The alien shrieked, a high-pitched sound of pain and fury. The third soldier, still firing his rifle erratically, suddenly stopped. He had exhausted his weapon's power pack. In the sudden silence, he stood panting, a blind, helpless giant. Kalen's team emerged from the darkness, surrounding the 2 grounded soldiers. They moved with a silent, coordinated menace that was far more terrifying than any frontal assault. The leader, on his knees, finally managed to scrape enough of the resin from his visor to see the figures that encircled him. 5 of them, cloaked in the very camouflage they had sought to steal, their forms distorted and otherworldly. In their hands were primitive weapons of bone and wood, yet they had dismantled his high-tech squad in seconds. Kalen stepped forward and pulled the alien's helmet off. The face beneath was unlike anything he had ever seen up close. It was a being with gray, tough skin, a flat face with no discernible nose, and 4 small, dark eyes that blinked rapidly in the moonlight. It had an expression, Kalen realized, that was universal: fear. "You hunt us," Kalen said, his own voice low and steady. He knew the alien wouldn't understand his words, but the tone, the intent would be clear. He pointed his spear at the alien's chest. "Now you are the prey." They left one of them alive, the leader. They took his weapons, his communications device, and the glimmerwing plates from his armor. They left him his life, but they took his dignity. They bound him and left him at the edge of the compact's patrol zone with a message carved into his chest plate in the alien's own script. A message Xyler had taught Kalen's ancestors' ship's computer to translate long ago. Leave this world or become its soil. The captive they brought back was not the leader, but the one who had been trapped in the net. He was injured, his hand mangled by Finn's spear. He was their prize, their source of information. It was him Kalen dragged into the heart of Haven. The being was Xyler. Xyler awoke to pain, a throbbing agony in his hand, a dull ache in his head. He was in a cave, lit by the flickering orange light of a fire. The air smelled of smoke, cooked meat, and damp earth. His armor was gone. He was dressed in simple woven clothes. His injured hand had been crudely but effectively bandaged. He was surrounded by the feral humans. They watched him from the shadows, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. They were smaller than his own species, softer, but they moved with a predatory stillness that sent a shiver of primal fear through him. These were not the simple primitives from his reports. A human stepped forward into the light. It was the one who had led the ambush, the one who had disarmed his squad leader with contemptuous ease. The human knelt in front of him. It was Kalen. "You are the analyst," Kalen said. His words were guttural, strange, yet Xyler understood them. The universal translator, a tiny implant behind his ear, was still functioning. "The one who watches." Xyler was stunned. You know who I am." "We have been watching you too," Kalen replied. He held up the damaged power cell they had used as bait. "Your machines leave a trail." An older female, Ilara, approached and offered Xyler a wooden bowl filled with water. He drank greedily. His fear was still present, but it was being tempered by a growing sense of confusion. They had not killed him. They had treated his wound. They were speaking to him. "Why are you hunting us?" Kalen asked, his voice devoid of emotion. It was a simple question, but the answer was impossibly complex. "My commander, he believes you are an obstacle," Xyler said, his voice raspy. "To the pacification of this world. He sees your ability to move at night, your camouflage. He sees it as a tactical asset to be acquired. He sees our skin. He wants to wear it," Kalen said, a flicker of disgust in his eyes. "So he sent soldiers to take it from us." "I argued against it," Xyler said quickly, a desperate bid for self-preservation. "I told him you were not simple creatures, that your methods were sophisticated. And yet you followed his orders," Ilara said, her gaze penetrating. "You came into our lands to hunt our people." Xyler had no answer to that. He was a soldier. He followed orders. But looking into the eyes of these people, seeing their community carved from the bones of monsters, he felt the weakness of that excuse. "My commander, Vorlag, he does not understand," Xyler finally said. "He sees only victory or defeat. He believes this world can be tamed by force. He is wrong. This world does not bend. It breaks those who try to bend it." "It has broken many of your people already," Kalen stated. "And now it will break more. Your leader will see our message. He will see his captured soldier. He will not see it as a warning. He will see it as an insult. He will retaliate with overwhelming force." Kalen was right. Inside Citadel, Commander Vorlag stood over the holographic display of the bound, humiliated soldier they had recovered. The message carved into his armor glowed in red. The report of the lost squad, the captured analyst, and the stolen equipment was a litany of failure. His response was not one of caution. It was one of cold, absolute fury. "They have escalated," Vorlag rumbled to his assembled officers. "They have chosen open conflict. They think their primitive tactics can defeat our technology. We will correct this miscalculation. Immediately." He pointed to a spot on the holographic map, a cluster of thermal signatures deep in the mountains. "Haven. They have a nest. A central location. Our long-range scans have confirmed it," he declared. "They believe the mountains will protect them. They believe the darkness is their ally. We will turn the darkness into fire. We will turn their home into their tomb." He gave the order. "Scramble the assault ships. Arm them with incendiary ordnance. Wipe the anomaly off the map. Pacification would be achieved not by stealth but by annihilation." Xyler tried to explain this to his captors. "You don't understand the power you are challenging. He will not send another patrol. He will send an army. He will burn your home from the sky." "Let him try," Kalen said, his face grim. "This mountain is more than our home. It is our fortress, and we are not the only things that live in these shadows." As he spoke, a distant sound began to echo through the valley. A low, powerful hum, not of nature but of engines, the sound of approaching dropships. The attack came without warning. One moment the night was filled with the familiar sounds of Xylos. The next, the sky was torn open by the roar of compact assault ships. They swept over the valley where Haven was nestled, their searchlights cutting stark, white paths through the darkness. Explosions rocked the mountainside. Incendiary bombs detonated against the cliffs, turning ancient rock into molten slag. The forest below erupted in chemical flames that burned with an unnatural, greenish light, consuming the phosphorescent moss and iron trees alike. The air filled with the stench of scorched earth and vaporized stone. Inside Haven, chaos reigned. The people screamed, running for the deeper caves, their home crumbling around them. Chunks of the fossilized ribcage that formed their great hall crashed to the ground. Kalen, Alara, and the other hunters worked frantically, herding people to safety, trying to maintain some semblance of order amidst the terror. This was the overwhelming force Xyler had warned them about. It was a senseless, brutal assault, an act of extermination. In the small cave where he was being held, Xyler watched the destruction through a fissure in the rock. He saw the fire, he felt the concussive blasts, and he felt a sickening knot of responsibility. This was his people's doing. This was the cold, military logic of Commander Vorlag made real, and it was a tactical blunder of catastrophic proportions. "He's making a mistake," Xyler yelled over the din to Kalen, who was helping a wounded Lena into the cave. "A terrible mistake. He's destroying us," Lena cried, clutching a piece of shrapnel in her arm. "No," Xyler insisted, his scientific mind cutting through the panic. "Don't you understand? The Glimmerwing stalkers, they nest in these mountains. The sonic resonance of their hatching grounds is stable, predictable. This level of seismic and sonic disruption," Kalen's eyes widened in comprehension. He had spent his life studying the creatures. He knew their habits, their temperament. They were territorial, aggressive, but they followed patterns. The explosions, the fires, the constant drone of the ships, it was like kicking a hornet's nest the size of a mountain. "He's driving them insane," Kalen breathed. As if on cue, a new sound joined the roar of the assault ships. It was a shriek. A high, piercing cry of agony and rage, multiplied 100 times over. It came from the deep caves, from the hidden valleys, from the very heart of the mountain. The Glimmerwing stalkers, driven from their nests by the fire and noise, were swarming. The compact soldiers landing on the ground met a nightmare. They had expected to mop up the fleeing survivors of an aerial bombardment. Instead, they were met by a tide of glistening black chitin and shearing claws. Dozens, then hundreds of Glimmerwing stalkers poured out of the darkness, maddened with pain and fear. They didn't hunt with their usual stealth and precision. They attacked in a frenzied, suicidal wave. They threw themselves at the armored soldiers, their scythe-like limbs tearing through armor plating. They slammed into the energy fences of the hastily established command post. Their sonic pulses, once used for hunting, were now unleashed in unison, creating waves of concussive force that cracked helmet visors and shattered the morale of the invaders. Aboard his command ship, hovering above the chaos, Commander Vorlag watched his ground forces being torn apart. "What is happening?" he roared into the comms. "Report. Status." The replies were a garbled mess of screaming, plasma fire, and the horrifying shrieks of the stalkers. "We are being overrun. There are too many of them. Our sensors are useless. The sonic interference is ag. They're breaking through the perimeter. There." The transmission ended in a wet, tearing sound. Vorlag had wanted to turn the darkness into fire. Instead, he had unleashed the full fury of the night upon his own men. In the cave, a strange and desperate alliance was being forged. "I can stop this," Xyler said, his voice urgent. "Your people and mine are being slaughtered. Vorlag's command ship is coordinating the assault. It's also broadcasting a command frequency to his ground troops. If I can get to one of their comms relays, I can alter that frequency. I can piggyback a signal onto it." "What kind of signal?" Kalen asked, his mind racing. "A sonic frequency. One that will amplify the stalker's rage, but also direct it. I can mimic the resonant frequency of a stalker queen's distress call. It will draw every Glimmerwing on this mountain to a single point. And at the same time, I can broadcast a wave of white noise on the compact comms channel, blinding their sensors and sowing total confusion. "You would turn the beasts on your own army?" Ilara asked, her expression unreadable. "My army is trying to exterminate your people based on a flawed strategy," Xyler retorted. "This is no longer a battle, it is a massacre. The only way to stop it is to turn Vorlag's own weapon, this planet, against him so decisively that he has no choice but to retreat." Kalen looked at Lena, at the terrified faces of his people huddled in the deeper caves. He looked at the alien scientist, whose people had murdered Marcus and brought fire to his home. The choice was clear. Survival overrode everything. "There's a comms relay on the eastern ridge," Kalen said. "The landing zone for their primary assault. Getting to it will be impossible." "Not for us," Lena said, getting to her feet, her face pale but determined. She gestured to the glimmerwing hides hanging on the cave wall. "We can move through them, through the stalkers and the soldiers." "I can't wear one of those," Xyler said. I don't know how." "You won't have to," Kalen said, grabbing his spear. He looked at Xyler. "You will be our guide to the machine. We will be your shield against the monsters, yours and ours." The journey to the eastern ridge was a descent into hell. The world was a canvas of green fire, black shadows, and the frantic, strobing flashes of plasma fire. The air was thick with the screams of dying soldiers and the triumphant, terrible shrieks of the stalkers. Kalen, Lena, and Silas moved as a single unit, their cloaked forms flowing through the chaos. They kept Xyler in their center, a vulnerable, uncamouflaged figure who flinched at every explosion. They moved not like hunters, but like wraiths, using their knowledge of the terrain to slip through the pockets of the raging battle. They saw things that would haunt their dreams for years. A compact soldier, his armor breached, being torn apart by 3 stalkers. A glimmerwing bull, its carapace glowing red from nearby fires, smashing an armored vehicle to pieces. It was a war between 2 forces, and the humans were ghosts slipping through the cracks. They reached the base of the ridge. The command post was a scene of utter bedlam. Soldiers were firing blindly into the darkness, their formations broken. Stalkers were leaping over the energy barriers, heedless of the searing pain. The comms relay, a tall, slender spire, stood in the center of the madness. "There," Xyler pointed, his voice trembling. "I have to get to the primary console at its base." "We'll clear a path," Kalen said grimly. He looked at Lena and Silas. "No killing the soldiers, just create a diversion. Draw the stalkers away from the tower. Use the sonic lures." They split up. Lena and Silas disappeared into the chaos, armed with small, hand-cranked devices that emitted a frequency irresistible to the enraged creatures. The effect was immediate. A large group of stalkers that had been battering the command post walls broke off, swarming after the new, more tantalizing sound. The diversion gave Kalen and Xyler the opening they needed. They sprinted across the exposed ground, plasma bolts searing the air around them. They reached the base of the relay tower just as a massive compact soldier, his armor scarred and dented, saw them. It was Commander Vorlag. He must have descended from his ship to rally his collapsing forces. He raised his plasma cannon not at Kalen but at Xyler. "Traitor!" he roared, his voice booming through his helmet's external speaker. Kalen didn't hesitate. He threw himself at Xyler, knocking them both to the ground as a bolt of white-hot energy vaporized the spot where they had been standing. "Get to the console!" Kalen yelled, scrambling to his feet. He stood between the alien commander and the scientist, armed with nothing but a spear. Vorlag stalked toward him, a giant of metal and rage. "You, primitive, you have cost me this world. I will take your hide myself and mount it on my ship's bridge." Behind them, Xyler frantically worked at the console, his 4-digited hands flying across the holographic interface. Codes and frequencies scrolled across the screen. The confrontation was a study in contrasts. Vorlag, the embodiment of technological might, his armor plated, his weapon devastating. Kalen, the pinnacle of biological adaptation, his body clad in the skin of a monster, his weapon a sharpened stick. Vorlag fired. Kalen dodged, the plasma bolt melting the rock behind him. He was faster, more agile. He used the relay tower as cover, weaving around it, forcing the commander to reposition. He knew he couldn't win a direct fight. He just had to buy Xyler enough time. "Almost there," Xyler shouted. Vorlag, enraged by the human-s evasiveness, charged forward, intending to crush Kalen with his sheer mass. Kalen stood his ground. At the last possible second, he dropped, sliding between the commander's legs. As he passed under, he thrust his spear upward, not at the thick chest plate, but at the cluster of power conduits and hydraulics at the armor's hip joint. The crystal tip found a seam. With a shower of sparks and a hiss of escaping fluid, Vorlag's leg seized up. The commander roared in pain and surprise, his leg locking at an awkward angle. He stumbled, his balance compromised. At that exact moment, Xyler slammed his hand down on the console. "Done!" A new sound filled the air. It was a deep, subsonic hum that vibrated in their bones, followed by a piercing, directional screech that emanated from every compact speaker on the battlefield. It was the Stalker Queen's distress call, broadcast on an open channel, aimed directly at the heart of the battle. Simultaneously, the compact soldiers' comms flooded with static. Their heads-up displays went blank. Their sensors failed. They were deaf, blind, and adrift in a sea of monsters. The effect on the Glimmerwing stalkers was instantaneous and absolute. Every creature, from the smallest scout to the largest bull, stopped what it was doing. Their heads snapped up, their antennae quivering. A primal, overriding instinct took hold. Protect the Queen. Destroy the threat. And the signal was pointing directly at the largest concentration of compact energy signatures. Commander Vorlag and his command post. The tide of chitin turned. It was no longer a frenzied swarm, it was a directed weapon, a living tsunami of claws and fangs, all converging on a single point. Vorlag saw it coming. His 4 eyes widened in horror as the sea of monsters he had unleashed turned on him. He tried to raise his cannon, but his damaged leg gave way. He fell to one knee, a helpless titan in the face of the planet's righteous fury. Kalen grabbed Xyler and pulled him away, back into the shadows. They watched as the wave of Glimmerwings washed over the command post, over the remaining soldiers, and over their commander. Vorlag's screams were lost in the cacophony. The battle was over. The retreat was a panicked, disorganized flight. The surviving compact soldiers scrambled back to their remaining ships, pursued by the relentless stalkers. Within the hour, the last of the assault ships had lifted off, leaving behind a battlefield of wrecked machinery, dead soldiers, and the victorious, shrieking monsters of Xylos. Haven was saved. The cost had been immense. Their home was scarred, many of their people were injured, and the forest around them was a burnt wasteland. But they had survived. In the quiet aftermath, as the stalkers' rage subsided and they retreated to their disturbed nests, Kalen stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. He watched the last compact ship, Vorlag's command vessel, ascend into the clouds and disappear. Xyler stood beside him. The alien scientist was now a man without a people, a traitor to his own kind. "They will not be back," Xyler said quietly. "Not soon. The losses were too great. The official report will list this planet as an unviable death world. Vorlag's ambition will be recorded as a catastrophic failure." "And you?" Kalen asked. "What will you do?" "I cannot go back," Xyler replied, looking at his bandaged hand. Perhaps there is something I can learn here if you will have me." Kalen looked at the alien, then at the ruins of his home. They had been enemies, hunter and prey. But in the final crucible of fire and death, they had become something else. Allies, survivors. "We have much to rebuild," Kalen said, his gaze turning to the rising light of Xylos's distant suns, a rare event that painted the sky in hues of violet and orange. "We will need every hand." He held out his own hand, not in aggression, but in invitation. After a moment's hesitation, Xyler took it. The pact was sealed, not with words, but with a shared understanding born from the terror of the night. The top of the food chain on Xylos was not a position one could hold for long. It was a precarious, shifting throne. The humans had learned this long ago. The Compact had learned it in a single, brutal night. As Kalen looked out at his scarred but unconquered world, he knew this was not an ending. It was a beginning. The universe was vast and the Compact was patient, but so were the people of Haven. And they, unlike the Skyfolk, had the gleam of the world's deadliest monsters in their eyes and wore its secrets on their backs. They would be ready.